Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue à la seconde audience du Tribunal européen en défense des écosystèmes aquatiques. Nous étudierons aujourd'hui, ce 27
hearing
février,
of
le
the
cas de la
European
pollution du
Tribunal
fleuve
in
Moroni en Guyane
defense
française.
of aquatic
Cet événement se
ecosystem.
déroule en ligne en raison
Today,
du
we
contexte
will be
sanitaire
discussing
actuel,
the
mais la session
condemnation
sera
case
enregistrée
of
pour celles et ceux
Moroni
qui souhaiteraient la visionner
River
plus tard.
in French
D'ailleurs, vous
Guiana.
pouvez choisir dès
This
maintenant en quelle langue vous
event
souhaitez visionner
is
cette
held
audience, en
online
anglais sur le Facebook
because of the
de
health
l'Alliance mondiale pour les droits de la
situation.
nature et en français
We
sur
will
la page
be
Facebook du Earth
discussing
européen.
about
Avant tout,
and you
j'aimerais
can follow
remercier tous les
us in our
participants
different
de leur présence.
page.
C'est beaucoup de
Before I
travail
begin,
et
I'd like
surtout
to
beaucoup
thank
de
all the
réunions pour réussir
participants
à
for
tous
all
nous
the hard
rassembler aujourd'hui.
work
Je suis
that has
profondément
led us
reconnaissante
to
envers
this
chacun d'entre
important
vous,
moment.
mais aussi
I'd like
envers
to
toutes
thank
celles et ceux
each
qui
one
viennent
of
cette
you,
audience
especially
depuis chez
those
eux et suivent de
who
près
are
notre travail.
participating from
Avant
home
de
and
commencer cette
appreciate
audience, je
our
me dois de
work.
faire quelques rappels pour
Before
vous rappeler
beginning,
pourquoi nous
I'd
sommes
like
ici
to
aujourd'hui.
remind you of
Les
some
droits de la nature constituent une nouvelle approche du droit de l'environnement,
housekeeping things
considérant la nature non comme un puits de ressources et services
and
infinis à
also an
disposition des êtres
introduction.
humains, mais bien comme un
Nature
sujet de droit, en
is
reconnaissant
a
sa valeur
subject
intrinsèque.
of rights.
Considérant que les tribunaux
We
du
must
monde entier
consider
devraient
that
traiter les cas
tribunals
des violations
around
des
the
droits de la
world
nature à
must
travers cette approche
keep these
écocentrée,
violations
l'Alliance
of
mondiale pour les
rights
droits de
of
la nature
nature,
a créé des tribunaux
and
citoyens
the
fictifs
Global
dédiés.
Alliance for the
Notre
Rights of
objectif est donc
Nature
le
has
suivant:
created
faire en sorte que les
this
intérêts des
initiative.
êtres
We want
non
to
humains soient
work
considérés
so
comme
that
égaux
interests
à ceux
are
des êtres humains.
considered equal
Or,
to
pour
those
cela,
of
il faut
humans.
réinterroger notre
For
relation
this,
à la nature,
we must
et d'autant
ask
plus en
ourselves,
Europe,
what is our
où le dualisme
relationship
nature-culture demeure prégnant.
with nature?
Nous ne défendons pas la nature.
We
Nous sommes la
don't
nature qui se défend.
we
Nous faisons
don't only
partie
defend nature, we
intégrante
are
de cette
part of
incroyable
nature.
communauté qu'est le
We're
vivant,
defending ourselves. We're
l'écosystème
part of
Terre,
this community,
au même titre que tous les
this
autres êtres.
ecosystem.
C'est dans cet objectif
So
que nous
it's
avons
in this
organisé de nombreux
objective that
tribunaux
we
à
have
travers le monde.
organized several
En
tribunals around the
2014, nous
world. In
commencions cette belle
2014,
aventure à
we
Quito
started
avec
this
le premier
beautiful
tribunal.
adventure in Quito with our
Le second
first
tribunal
tribunal.
s'est
The
déroulé la même
second
année à Lima
tribunal
en décembre
placed on the
2014.
same year in
Nous
Lima in
continuons
December
aussi le
2014.
troisième
We
tribunal à
continue
Paris
with our
en
third
2015,
tribunal in
en
Paris in
marge de la COP
2015,
21, puis le quatrième à Bonn
framework of
en
COP
2017, en marge de
21.
la COP 23.
And then our
Notre
fourth
dernier
was in
tribunal
Bonn
s'est
in
déroulé en
2017.
2019
Our
au Chili
last
sur
tribunal
le
took
sujet de la
place
privatisation de
in
l'eau.
Chile in 2019.
Ces tribunaux ont tous
This
constitué un merveilleux moyen de donner voix
tribunal
à la
has
nature,
been
afin
means
de comprendre que celle-ci
to
doit être
give
considérée
voice
comme
to
un sujet de
nature
droit, et
and
que pour
consider
cela, il est nécessaire
subject of
de
rights.
changer
And
notre
for this
cosmovision.
reason, it's important to change our
La
worldview.
jurisprudence de ces tribunaux est basée sur la Déclaration universelle des droits
The
de la Terre-Mère,
jurisprudence
écrite
of
et adoptée à
this
Cochabamba, en
tribunal
Bolivie,
is
lors de
based
la
on the
Conférence mondiale
Universal
des peuples sur le
Declaration
changement
of the
climatique et
Rights
les droits
of
de la
Mother
Terre-Mère.
Earth.
Une déclaration qui a été légitimée et promue
This declaration
par
has
plus de
been
33 000 membres
legitimated
de la société
and
civile.
has the participation of more than
Cette année, nous
33,000
organisons
members
donc le
of civil
Tribunal européen en
society. So
défense des
this year
écosystèmes
we are
aquatiques.
organizing the
Pourquoi
European
cette
Tribunal,
thématique?
the
Parce
defense
que
of
parmi toutes
aquatic
les menaces aux
ecosystems.
conditions de la vie sur Terre,
Why?
la
Well,
pollution de
because of
l'eau
threats
est l'une des
and
plus
the
alarmantes.
conditions of life in Earth,
L'Agence
contamination of
européenne pour
water
l'environnement indiquait
is
que
one of the
seulement
most alarming
40%
ones.
des eaux de
We
surface
know that
sont
only
en bon état
40%
écologique
of
dans l'Union européenne.
surface waters are in good
Face à cette
situation
crise
in the European
écologique, les
Union.
droits de la nature
So,
apportent
given
donc
this ecological
une solution
crisis,
systémique en
we
reconnaissant
must
les
find
droits des
systemic
écosystèmes
solutions,
aquatiques à
recognizing the
exister
rights of
et à être maintenus
aquatic
pour leur valeur
ecosystems to
intrinsèque
exist
et en
and to be
permettant de
maintained
faire
because
valoir
of
ces
their
droits
intrinsic
devant des
value
tribunaux.
before
C'est
tribunals.
donc un plaisir d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui.
So it's a pleasure to
Cette
be
audience
with
de
you
2h30 est
today.
tenue par
The
un panel de
hearing of
personnalités
2 hours and a
exceptionnelles.
half will
Tout d'abord, Marie
have the
Lermite, qui nous honore
participation
de sa présence
of a
pour la cérémonie
wonderful
d'ouverture,
panel.
directrice de
First,
recherche honoraire au
Marie-Angèle
CNRS et
will
directrice d'études honoraires
introduce
à
and
l'EHESS.
have the
Elle est
opening
l'une des
ceremony.
premières juristes à avoir
She is
étudié les
one
droits
of
de la
the
nature en
first
France.
jurists that has studied the rights of
Ensuite,
nature
nos
in
juges, que je
France.
me dois de me présenter.
And then I will
Tout
introduce our
d'abord, Cormac
judges.
Cullinan, le
First,
président de notre
Cormac
tribunal
Cullinan, the president
et
and the
directeur
chairman
du
of our
Wild Law
tribunal. He
Institute,
is the
ainsi
director
que
of
de
Wild
Cullinan
Law
Associates,
Institute,
un
and
important
Cullinan
cabinet d'avocats
Associates
spécialisé dans l'environnement au Cap, mais aussi
specializes
de la Société
in
de conseil en droit et en
environment
gouvernance
issues.
Act International. Cormac a rédigé des lois,
Cormac
des
has
politiques,
drafted
ainsi que des stratégies
laws, policies, and environmental
environnementales et a
strategies.
conseillé des réformes
And he
institutionnelles
has
dans plus de
advised
20
for
pays. Son
institutional
ouvrage
reforms in more than 20
Wild Law,
countries.
Manifesto for Earth Justice, a
His
consisté
work,
à développer
Wild Law, a
l'approche de
manifesto
la
for
jurisprudence de la
Earth
Terre et a
Justice,
contribué à
has
inspirer
helped develop
le mouvement mondial
jurisprudence
croissant en
and
faveur des
has
droits de la
contributed
nature.
to inspire the world
Cormac a dirigé
movement
la
in
rédaction de
favor
la
of the
Déclaration
rights of
universelle des droits de la
nature.
Terre-Mère,
He
que
has
j'ai cité
also
auparavant,
directed the
et a été l'un
drafting
des
of the
fondateurs de
Universal
l'Alliance mondiale
Declaration
pour les
of
droits
the
de la
Rights
nature.
of Mother
Bienvenue,
Earth.
Cormac.
Welcome, Cormac.
Nous avons ensuite Tom
We
Goldtooth,
also
qui
have
sera
with
le
us
juge de cette
Tom
audience,
Goldtooth. He will be a
directeur
judge in this
exécutif
hearing. He
de
is the
l'Indigenous
executive director of
Environmental
Indigenous
Network
Environmental
et membre du
Network
comité
and
exécutif de
also a
l'Alliance
member of
mondiale
the
pour les droits de la
executive
nature.
committee of
Il
the
a été impliqué dans
Global
les
Alliance
questions et
for
les
the
programmes
Rights of
liés à
Nature.
l'environnement,
He
en
has been
travaillant au sein des
involved in
gouvernements
matters and
tribaux au
programs
développement
linked
d'infrastructures
to
de
the
protection de l'environnement
environment and
basées sur les
works
populations
with the
indigènes.
tribal
Nous
governments
sommes très
and
reconnaissants
in
de vous
the
compter parmi nous
development of
aujourd'hui, Tom.
infrastructure. We're very glad to
Quant à
have you
Valérie
with us
Cabanes,
today.
elle est juriste de
Valérie
droit
Cabanes,
international,
she is an
spécialisée dans les droits de
international
l'homme.
law jurist.
Elle
She
est également membre du
specializes
comité
in
exécutif de
human
l'Alliance
rights.
mondiale
She
pour
is
les droits de
also
la
a
nature
member
depuis
of the
2015
executive committee
et l'une des
of the
experts du
Global
réseau des
Alliance
initiatives
for the Rights
Harmony
of
with Nature des
Nature.
Nations Unies depuis 2016.
She's been working with
En
Giant Nations
2013,
since
elle a lancé une
2016.
initiative
In
citoyenne sur les
2013,
crimes
she
d'écocide
launched a
et a
citizen
contribué à la
initiative
rédaction d'une proposition de modification
about
du statut de la
ecocide and
Cour pénale
contributed to the
internationale sur
drafting
le
of
crime
a
d'écocide. Elle
proposal
est
to
aussi l'auteur de
modify
2 ouvrages,
the
Homo
status
Natura,
of
en
the
harmonie
penal,
avec le vivant,
International
et aussi
Penal
Un
Court.
nouveau droit pour la Terre, pour en finir avec l'écocide. Merci Valérie
She's
pour votre
written
présence.
Un nouveau droit pour la
Quant à
terre pour
notre
finir
dernier
avec
juge, Lisa Mead,
l'écocide.
elle est
Welcome,
avocate,
Valérie.
éducatrice
Lisa Mead
et
is a
défenseur des
lawyer.
droits de la
She
Terre.
is
Elle
an
dirige la
educator
Earth Law
and
Alliance
a
et est membre du
defender
comité
of
directeur
the
fondateur
rights
de
of
l'Ecological
the
Law
earth.
and Governance
She
Association.
directs Earth
En
Law
2018,
Alliance and is
elle
a
est agi
member
en tant
of
que
the
conseillère principale
committee
pour les
and
droits
the
de la
founder
nature au
director of
Tribunal permanent sur
Ecological
les droits
Law
de
and
l'homme et le
Governance
changement climatique.
Association.
Lisa a également
Elle
contribué
work
en tant
in favor
qu'experte
of human rights and nature.
à
She
l'initiative
has
Harmony with
also
Nature
worked
et a
with
plaidé
the
en faveur
initiative
des droits des
Harmony with
océans
Nature
au tribunal que
and
nous
has
avons organisé à Paris
advocated
en
in
2015.
favor of
Bienvenue,
the
Lisa.
rights of oceans.
Ensuite,
In
je vais
2015,
introduire les
Lisa.
parties à cette audience.
Finally, I will
Tout d'abord,
introduce
Marine
the
Calmé,
parties of
présentatrice
this
du cas,
audience. Maureen
est
Calmé, she
avocate
is the
et
presenter
présidente de
of our
l'ONG
case.
Wild Legal
She is
pour la
lawyer and
défense des droits de la
president of
nature.
Wild
Elle
Legal
travaille
for the
notamment
defense
avec
of
les
the rights
peuples
of
indigènes de
nature.
Guyane
She
française
works with
pour lutter
indigenous
contre
peoples
l'industrie de
of
l'extraction de
the
l'or.
French Guiana to fight
Ensuite, Lilia
against
Opoya,
the
notre témoin,
extraction of
est une
gold.
habitante du
Lina
village amérindien
Opoya
Guayana,
is
de
a
Taluène,
part
dans la région
of
du
an
Haut-Maroni, en
Amerindian
Guyane
village
française.
in Guyana.
Elle préside l'association des
And
femmes
she is
victimes du
the
mercure.
chair of the
Quant à Alexis
organization
Kyoka, il
Association des
interviendra
femmes
en tant
victimes du
qu'expert
mercure.
juridique.
Alexis
Juriste
Kyoka,
spécialisé dans
he
les
is
droits des peuples
special
autochtones,
jurist.
il a
He
participé aux négociations
specializes
internationales
in the
qui ont
rights
abouti à
of
l'adoption de
indigenous
la
people,
Déclaration des Nations
and he
Unies
has
sur les
participated
droits
in
des peuples autochtones.
negotiations, the Declaration of
Ensuite,
the
quant aux
United
parties de
Nations
la
of the
défense, que
rights of
sont la
indigenous
préfecture de
people.
Guyane française,
We also
le
have the
ministère des Outre-mer, ainsi que
participation
le
of
ministère
the
de l'Intérieur,
prefecture
nous les avons
of the
invités
French
à
Guiana
présenter leur défense, mais nous n'avons pas obtenu de
and
réponse
the
de
French
leur part.
state. We've invited them, but we haven't
Je me
received
dois
any
également de vous
response from
présenter
their
notre
side.
procureur, Rebecka
I
Le
will
Moine, qui est
introduce
membre du Parti
our
vert et porte-parole pour la
prosecutor,
biodiversité.
Rebecka Le
Elle a
Moine.
été
She is a member
récompensée par le
and a
WWF
spokesperson
et le roi de
for
Suède en tant que
biodiversity. She
héros
has
de
worked for
l'environnement
WWF
pour avoir pris l'initiative de
and the
célébrer la
King of
journée de la
Sweden
biodiversité des
as a
Nations
hero
Unies en
of
Suède.
environment.
Titulaire d'une maîtrise en biologie,
And she has a master's degree in biology
de la conservation et ayant travaillé comme consultante
and
en
has
biologie,
worked
sa plus
as
grande
a
préoccupation
consultant in
est de trouver des
biology.
solutions
Her
politiques
concern is
pour
to
lutter
find
contre
political
l'extinction
solutions
massive
to
de nos
fight
espèces voisines.
against the massive
Elle
extinction
s'efforce
of
donc
our
de
species.
changer nos valeurs fondamentales
She works to
afin que les
protect our
êtres
fundamental
non humains
values
aient
so
également des
that
droits légaux.
non-humans also
C'est un
have
honneur
legal rights.
de vous avoir
It's
comme
an honor to
procureur,
have you with us
Rebecka.
as a prosecutor,
Je ne pourrais
Rebecka.
finir cette introduction sans présenter mes deux merveilleuses collègues et
Now,
amies,
I'd like to introduce my
Natalia et
colleagues and
Olivia,
friends,
avec qui
Natalia
je
and
partage
Olivia,
le
with
co-secrétariat.
whom I share
D'abord,
the
Natalia, s'il faut
Co-Secretariat.
la présenter,
Natalia,
est
I have to
consultante pour les droits de la nature
introduce
et a
her. She
fondé
is a
l'Alliance
consultant
mondiale pour les droits de
for
la
the
nature
rights
en
of
Équateur.
nature. She has found
Elle détient une
the
maîtrise
Global
en sciences
Alliance
politiques
for
de
the
la
rights of
Flaxo
nature in
Équateur
Ecuador.
et un master de
She has a
l'UASB sur le
master's
changement
degree in
climatique.
Flaxo,
Elle a
Ecuador.
promu la reconnaissance des
She
droits
has
de la nature
promoted the
dans la
recognition of the
Constitution
rights of
équatorienne
nature in in the
et a
Ecuadorian
été la secrétaire
constitution,
de l'ensemble
and
des
she's been
tribunaux
the
organisés par l'Alliance.
secretary of all the
Quant à
hearings
Olivia,
organized
nous
by the
avons toutes deux un
Alliance.
parcours assez similaire.
Olivia, we've
Après un stage
worked
passionnant au sein de
together
l'Alliance en
after
Équateur, dans le cadre de
working
nos
in
études à
the
Sciences Po,
Alliance in Ecuador.
nous nous sommes engagés à faire partie du
We
Co-Secretariat.
became
Olivia
part
étudie
of the
les sciences humaines et
Co-Secretariat.
sociales
She
et
studies
suit le
human
master
and
Génération,
social
Future
sciences
et Transition juridique.
and is studying
Quant à
master's
moi, j'étudie le droit de
future
l'environnement
generations and
et je suis le
juridical
master
transition.
Risques, Sciences, Santé et Environnement. Nous militons tous deux pour une écologie qui tienne
And
compte du
now
capital océan,
myself, I
qui
study
fasse de la fin du mois
environmental
et de la fin du même
law
combat.
in the
C'est
master's
pourquoi nous
degree,
promouvons également
risk,
une
science, and
écologie
health and the
décoloniale ainsi
environment.
qu'une écologie écocentrée qui reconnaît ses droits à la
And
nature.
work to recognize the
Comme vous pouvez le
rights of
constater, nous avons
nature.
aujourd'hui un
As you
panel
can
de
see,
juges, présentateurs et
our
présentatrices, ainsi qu'une procureure très inspirante.
judges,
C'est vraiment
panelists,
une
and
très
all
belle
our participants, our
opportunité de vous compter
prosecutors, they will
parmi nous
all
aujourd'hui.
inspire
Et
us,
sur
and
ces
we are
mots, je
very
vais donc
happy to
ouvrir
have them
officiellement la session du
here with us
tribunal et
today.
passer le mot à
With
Tom
no
Goldtooth
further
pour la
ado,
cérémonie de l'eau.
when
Merci.
this meeting, and I'll give the floor to Judge Tom Goldtooth for the water ceremony. Judge, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Camille. I'm very honored to have been requested to facilitate and petition the sacredness of our water. It's a very key element of the natural laws that we have been taught. I've been given the authority from our women at this time to speak for the water here in my homeland in Minnesota and what they call the United States with our Dakota people. The women are the keepers of the water and our men are the keepers of the fire. So we have these protocols that teach us our duties and our responsibilities in recognizing those natural laws and the creative principles of Mother Earth and Father Sky. So I like to ask everyone to hold their containers of water. If it's on your desk, you can put your hand on it if you want. I'm going to say just a few words to give some centering, the centering of the purpose of this tribunal and this series on recognizing our ecosystems with our aquatic relatives, our rivers and our water. So I'm going to just share with you some of these words that are woven into the teachings of our people. You could close your eyes and you could listen to the words, and I hope and I pray that they would resonate with you as you hold this water. Think about the water as your relative. We are part of water. Water, of course, is part of the earth. It's part of the sky. So when you're done, when I'm done, you can put the water down and during break time, go outside and return this water to the earth, someplace in your environment. Water is sacred. Water is life. Water is essential for the beginning of life and needs to be respected, honored, and protected. We are cradled by water before we are born. Water gives life to all our foods, our medicines, including the fish and aquatic life. Water is the melody and the rhythm of life. Water has its own voice, its own personality, and intelligence. Water has different songs that it shares with us. Water is part of the cycle of life from the sky to the earth back to the sky, in constant movement of regeneration and restoration. From the headwaters, from the glaciers and the springs to the rivers and streams that are like the arteries and veins of Mother Earth, and the vast lakes and oceans on the surface and deep in the aquifers of our mother. We are being mindful of our sacred relationship to the oceans. The ocean is the sacred mat of the world and connects us all. Haumidakiapi. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Maintenant, nous allons laisser la parole à Marie-Angèle Lermite pour la cérémonie d'ouverture.
Now we will give the floor to Marie-Angèle Hermite. Do you have my PowerPoint? Next, please. Well, I wanted to tell you first of all, given that I was advised of this very late, and I wasn't able to become familiar with the river this time. I speak for the river, but I'd like to talk a little bit differently. I've not been to Guyane. I've not visited the river or its forest. To be able to speak and to speak as the river, as the forest, we have to be recognized by those who are familiar with the river and known by the fish theory. So I'm not known by the inhabitants of Guyana. So I've written and I've said, well, at the time I did not speak about natural entities. I spoke about ecosystems. But why ecosystems? Because what I was asked by the European Union Commission was talked about the difficulty that did not exist at the time, because the Rio conference was held 5 years later, and we did not know at the time what biodiversity was. In this sense, after having worked, I've concluded among experts of the Commission that it was important for ecosystems to have a legal personality and have a voice to be heard. Well, the idea behind was that, well, we were not able to obtain results with the current system, the system of goods, if you want to call it that way. And it was important to carry out a revolution, such as the one that allowed us to abolish slavery. And especially because when speaking about slavery, this is between and among humans. When we talk about a revolution, we talk about the revealing of a community, of a society. So it's impossible to think that within 2,000 years, this was still taking place. So I've worked on the rights of indigenous people. So my proposal is to speak about goats that are useless, but they know very well this path of transhuman. So I only have some experience, and this is precisely what I'd like to present to you today. So let's speak a little bit more about this topic. What is a river? Well, I started working on the Loire and a little bit less than the Rhone. It's a unique natural resource. It's the child of a watershed. It's a home for vegetables, for animals that live there, and it's also an endless source of life and human activities. This is a river where we interact with brothers, sisters, with indigenous peoples, with friends, and today also with gold panners. What happens today with the Mercury and Pioneer? A it's a scourge, and today we can say that if a river is a body, today this river is an injured body. We also have this attack to the mental autonomy of people. Why? Because they're under exclusive control of public and private prisons, because there is no statute representation of indigenous people, no presence of those who live in the villages, nor from the victims of Mercury. And we also have a lack of statute representation of non-human life. I'll now like to go on to the next slide.
Donc là, je vous ai dit ce qu'il faudrait,
So
c'est-à-dire tout ce
I've
qui pourrait
talked about what could be the result of having a legal entity, but a river in a positive law is the joining of all things and all assets for usages that are different from preservation. We're speaking about industrial usages. If we have Mercury, the lore, for example, we know that there are close and there are many nuclear wastes that are contaminating waters. So water has been declared heritage and a common good. And currently, in juridical categories, these do not work. In other words, rivers are subject to persons, to administrative police, and public services that are multiple, to regimes that are intermediary, because things have changed between things and people, and we see a degradation of ecosystems that in this has today been recognized as an objective fact by Article 1246 of the Civil Code.
Difficile à obtenir,
It's
etc.
difficult to obtain and to prove.
Les auteurs
In this
de la
case, the authors of this degradation are very difficult to find, and this we know very well. The first thing to do would be to have a single person to manage this unique body and to be part of this adapted model as the Wanganui model in New Zealand. Now, the question that I've posed myself is that in case of gold panners, the simple solution for the rights of the river it cannot work yet, not until we find not the reason, because we know the reason, but we cannot solve it until we find ways to find the criminal. We know that we have police, we have law enforcement, but even if they're in all the territory, of course, it is evident that there is no possibility
ininterrompu, si vous voulez, de renforcer les forces de police et de gendarmerie
for law enforcement to act in this sense. Well,
immédiate des malades sur un point très précis.
For the French state, You're guilty of failure. And I know that you've spoken about the uncertainties and the impact of Mercury, but there are no uncertainties about the effects of Mercury. We'll later speak about the causes of these effects, but there are no uncertainties in this regard. We know very well what are the negative impacts of gold panning. We've estimated criminals, and we think they are 10,000. They are illegal and thus invisible. It goes from border to the other. They're extremely violent. They're well equipped. They're invisible, and this is their particularity compared to other violent criminals.
Des chercheurs d'or, de diamants, etc.
This particularity is common in the gold and diamond miners. Speaking about the site, well, this takes place on the border. It's huge, and it's not easy to enter, to penetrate. Even if we use technology, drones or others, what is the gold circuit, the telephone circuits that are being used? This is a prior stage, even before asking ourselves about legal entity. You find yourselves in a very particular situation
dans lesquelles la
personnalité as other situations where legal entity can work and function directly. And I think that in your case, there's a prior work that I'm not familiar with, but anyhow, by reading your work, I see it as a indispensable first stage. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'll be happy to answer to any questions, comments, or criticisms. Thank you so much, Marie-Angèle, for your presentation. It will definitely raise many important reflections.
To Cormac to open the session.
Thank you very much. It is my very great pleasure and honor to declare this session of the European Rights of Nature Tribunal open. As most of you will know, this is the second case in a series of cases which are all concerned with the protection of aquatic ecosystems. And as you know, one of the things that makes this planet we call Earth or Mother Earth so special is life. Life flows through everything and brings it to life. And water is essential. Like life, it flows. And as you've heard from our fellow judge, Tom Goldtooth, during the ceremony, water is so closely associated with life that one can say that water is life. So when we protect aquatic ecosystems, we are protecting life. In other words, we are protecting that which is most precious to us. We are protecting this vital force or energy called life, and that flows and brings everything to life. It brings plants to life, fungi, fish, animals, microorganisms. And of course, we ourselves cannot live without water. Approximately 70% of our body is water. So to a large extent, you can say we are water. This also means that if we allow water to be polluted, that pollution will flow too with the water. It will flow through the bodies of the plants and animals and through our bodies. So by poisoning the rivers, we poison not only our aquatic relatives, but also people. And in a very real way, we are poisoning life itself, that which gives life. And that is what this very important case is about. I'm particularly pleased and honored to be on this panel of judges to hear this case, because although I live in Africa and have never visited French Guiana itself, I have worked in the neighboring country, Suriname, and I have been in some of the forests and traveled on some of the rivers in the Moroni River basin. So I do have some idea of the incredible beauty and majesty of the homelands of the Wayana and Teko people. And when I was in Suriname, I was shown many photos of the damage caused by the illegal gold mining, and even met some of the young men who did that mining. They knew of the dangers that using mercury posed to their health, but they didn't care about that or about the damage to the forest or to other people or other creatures, because the lure of the money they could make from the gold was too great. And this, in a way, is part of the problem that humanity faces, and it is a difficult problem to solve. But before we hear this case and get to grips with the details, I would just like to say a few words about the work of the tribunal itself, because the tribunal is a unique body, and one of the most important aspects of it is that it adopts an ecocentric perspective. That means when the judges that sit on this panel listen to the cases and try to formulate our judgments, we think of justice, we seek justice not just for human beings, but we think of all the beings that are members of the community of life that we call Earth, and we try to seek justice for all. We also try to restore the damaged relationships. So we seek a restorative justice that heals rather than a justice that is about punishing people. And of course, we are humans and we have an imperfect understanding of the needs of the river and of the other creatures. And that is why it is so important that we hear the evidence and listen to the people who have the most intimate relationship with the forests and the Moroni River and the creatures. And this, of course, is in particular the indigenous peoples who have lived in relationship with them, as close relations with the river for thousands of years. Now, of course, this tribunal is not yet recognized by states as legitimate, but legitimacy, like trust, is something that cannot be commanded, it must be earned. And the legitimacy of this tribunal comes from the approach that we adopt, that we see the reality of everything being connected, and we approach problems from that point of view. And the people who are called upon to sit on the panel are people who have long experience in contributing to protecting and fighting for the protection, not just of people, but also of the whole community of life. I'd now, for each of these hearings, one of the judges on the panel takes particular responsibility for the case. And for this case, it is my brother, Judge Tom Goldtooth. And I will now like to hand over to Tom.
Tom, can you turn on your audio, please?
Okay. Yes, thank you, Cormac. I want to say greetings from Turtle Island, North America, Canada, and United States. And we say with our Dene people, our Dene people, our Dene people, our Navajo people, Yat'epene, that means good morning. And also with our Dakota Sioux people, we greet all of you in the perspective as you are my relatives, ha medakiapi. Ampetu de chante washtea iyuha na pe chiyuzapido. So this day, in a good heart, I shake your hands, all of you, all the audience. And I offer my thanks to those who invited me to be a tribunal judge. of the European Rights of Nature Tribunal in defense of aquatic ecosystems. Our Indigenous Environmental Network, along with the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature and the many allies, are working together with the European Hub of GARN to recognize and respect the inherent rights of aquatic ecosystems to exist, to survive, and thrive. Today, I am looking forward to hearing the case being presented on the situation that has been taking place for more than 30 years in French Guiana of illegal gold mining and trafficking that has devastated the region with environmental mercury contamination of the Moroni River and its vast aquatic ecosystem that has led to a collapse of the biodiversity, with mercury concentrations in the fish species threatening the local population's health, especially the local Amerindian indigenous peoples, the Wayani peoples. As an indigenous person, this is an important case and very timely. So with our people of the North, we send our heart and our prayers to our relatives there, the Wayani people and the other indigenous peoples of that land and territories. Our indigenous prophecies tell us that life on Mother Earth is in danger and is coming to a time of great transformation. I have been consulting with indigenous peoples from the global South to the North, and we are accepting our responsibility designated by our prophecies to tell the world that we must live in peace with our Mother Earth to ensure harmony within creation. Our Mother Earth is the source of life. Water is her lifeblood. The well-being of the natural environment predicts the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual longevity of our peoples, but all humanity and life as we know it. When all of our homelands are in a state of good health, our peoples and humanity are truly healthy. The inseparability of that relationship must be respected for the sake of our future generations and for the well-being of the earth herself. Alliances are being formed as what you are seeing now in this tribunal. Global and indigenous peoples, groups, and individuals committed to creating a system of jurisprudence that sees and treats Mother Earth, her vast circle of life, nature, and the waters as fundamental rights-bearing entities. This is a paradigm that is based on indigenous thought and what we call indigenous traditional knowledge that needs to be recognized by the world, that honors the territorial integrity of Mother Earth. This is the time of greatest challenge facing humanity in the 21st century. How do we reorientate the dominant industrialized societies so that they pursue human well-being in a manner that contributes to the health of our Mother Earth, the sacredness of our Mother Earth, the sacredness of the water of life, instead of undermining it? In other words, how do we live in harmony with nature? How do we utilize and change the laws of these governments, of France and many other governments that violate these natural laws that indigenous peoples talk about? Our creation stories, our indigenous genesis, begin with the Creator's beginning, awakening and awareness. We liken this to our own birth, and water is at the very beginning. Water is the medium which comes to us and carries us from the spirit world to the physical world. With our people, our women are the keepers of the water. with the passing of the water of the womb, the baby comes into this world to take the first breath, the sacred breath of air of Father Sky. That is why with our Dakota Oyate people, we have a word we say, Mini Wichoni, water is life, water of life. As a judge of this tribunal, I am making relations with my sisters and brothers of the Guyana Amerindian indigenous peoples. The framing of this case is around the Moroni River and the aquatic ecosystem and its destruction by illegal miners, with the impacts upon humans resulting from the violation of the rights of the Moroni River and the aquatic ecosystem. To add nuance to this, it can also be framed as two legal systems existing side by side. From an indigenous lens, this begins with the Wayani inherent relationship with their lands, territories, and waters. To restore the Earth's balance, we need to shift from a philosophy of domination over nature to a relationship of understanding and respect of the natural laws and love for the beauty of the creative female energy of Mother Earth. The spiritual authorities back in my homeland here say the world must stop its predatory treatment and the violence to Mother Earth. The time is now to be at peace, not at war with our Mother Earth and Father Sky. Earth jurisprudence recognizes the concept that we only have one Mother Earth. We must stand together in solidarity to protect her. Thank you very much. Haume Dr. Asi. Am I supposed to turn it to the next speaker?
Cormac, can you give the word to Rebecka Le Moine?
I apologize. Sorry, I was on mute. I would now call on our Earth Defender, Earth Prosecutor, who will lead the case on behalf of Mother Earth, Rebecka Le Moine. Thank you, Rebecka.
Thank you, Honorable Judge. I'm very honored to be here today as the prosecutor of the Earth. The Earth, a complex being consisting of life forms integrating in ways we can never predict. But we might understand some of the most fundamental elements, such as water. Water is the life stream as the blood in our veins. When we are poisoning the water, we are pouring poison into the flow of life. Without water, we die. Water is a true treasure and should be treated as such. But instead, gold is the symbol of treasure. The metal gold, with its use only to human as a symbol of status, a trick to our imagination, a decoration for our eyes. But others from that, the use of gold in our everyday life is very limited. Water, on the other hand, is something we use every day. For a thirsty throat, for cooking, for cleaning, for growing food. Water is the breath of life, and still, gold is one of the most expensive metals in the world, and water is sometimes being poisoned in order to extract it. This is happening in the French Guiana. This is why we are here today. French Guiana lies in South America and has an extreme rich biodiversity. Much of it is still unknown, but its life is threatened due to illegal gold mining. The illegal gold mining is leading to deforestation, new roads, an increased hunt in the forest for food, and an increased turbidity in the water. But it's also being poisoned with mercury. Mercury is being used in the extraction of gold, and hundreds of tons of mercury have been dumped in and around the aquatic system. The mercury bioaccumulates in the food chain, and this is a huge problem for those who are consuming the fishes in the river. This has, of course, affected all living beings in this area, and the Wayanteco Amerindian people are poisoned from mercury as they eat the life from the river. The greed of a few humans has led to suffering of many life and life forms. I'm here today to speak up for those who still have no name, or at least not a scientific name. Even if I don't know them by name, I know that healthy water is the bridge between the worlds. It's a bridge between the life in the water, the life in the air, the life in the soil, binding together huge distances. And this bridge is now under big threat, turbid and poisoned, a crime of various of life forms. These actions shows exactly how distanced we have become from nature and thereby reality. We need to rebound and we need to reconnect, and we must use every tool we can. Today we are here to use the laws based on the Universal Declaration of Mother Earth. As a prosecutor of the Earth, and especially of the case in the French Guiana and its aquatic systems, I declare that there are activities that threatens the ecosystem and its water, and thereby violates the rights to the water to live and give life, according to the Declaration of Rights of Mother Earth. Because of these crimes, it will be impossible to protect or uphold a healthy environment in and around the Moroni River. The aquatic system with all its inhabitants are in serious danger due to the continued contamination and lack of action by the French state. The Moroni River is the victim, and the main defendant in this case are the state of France. The French state have been given the opportunity to participate here today, but has decided not to. I ask the permission of the court to start these proceedings. I intend to present evidence and arguments for these alleged crimes, and I will call upon experts and witnesses. And I begin by calling up the case presenter, Marine Calme, who is a lawyer and president of Wild Legal, to give her statement. But before you present, I wonder if you can please explain how you are legitimate to be speaking for this case on behalf of the Moroni River. Please, Marine.
Mesdames et messieurs les juges, merci beaucoup pour cette invitation.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, judges, for this invitation to begin to answer to this question. Well, I'm a lawyer and I'm jurist and representative of Wild Legal, who for more than a year has been working on the campaign for the protection of the rights of Amazon rainforest and the protection of aquatic systems in Guyana. I've been working as of 2017 in Moroni together with other members of the Guyana and Teco peoples. I support them in the struggle against gold panning, and thanks to the Association of Wild Legal, we've got to know their situation, and we've brought light to this health scandal and ecological scandal on this territory. I will begin by introducing a map so that everyone can be familiar where this contamination is taking place in Moroni, in Upper Moroni region.
Est-ce que vous pouvez me confirmer que vous voyez bien la...
Could you please confirm that you can see my screen?
On voit ton écran, mais pas la carte elle-même. Il faut que tu cliques sur la carte.
Voilà.
We do see your screen, but not the map itself. Please click on it.
Ça n'a pas l'air de fonctionner. Attendez.
faut que tu sois patiente si tu as une petite connexion.
Ça me propose pas la bonne slide, malheureusement. Alors, je recommence. Voilà, ça y est. Très bien. Normalement, vous devez voir s'afficher.
Hopefully you can see it now. You can see now the French Guiana map. Well, it's located between Suriname and Brazil. Do you have it? Can you see it? Great. Thank you very much. So to begin this presentation, I'd like to get you in time. So since the 80s and 90s, the use of mercury in illegal gold panning generated a significant contamination of the Guyane's Amazonian terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. In 40 years, there are hundreds of tons of mercury that have been poured into nature, and particularly in the Moroni River. These clandestine activities are endangering the ecosystems and, of course, also the indigenous and local communities that rely on nature. French Guiana is located in South America, and the tropical forest that covers its territory, the only large rainforest in the European Union, is still widely preserved in 8.35 million hectares. It conceals an exceptional biodiversity among the richest in the world. A large part of flora and fauna inhabit the area and still unknown. The French Guiana is crossed by the Moroni River, which covers an area of 60,000 square kilometers. The Moroni River separates the French overseas territory from Suriname and flows into the Atlantic Ocean. This river is inhabited by numerous populations whose mixing has been ongoing for thousands of years. As well as being a major axis of exchanges in French Guiana, the Moroni River is also a very important identity component for the inhabitants of these areas, especially for Guayana and Teco Amerindian people established upstream of the river. This territory is located in the Amazonian Park of French Guiana, a protected area of 34,000 square kilometers. It's the largest French and European park. It is home to 50% of France's biodiversity, with numerous species of amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and many species of water fishes. Its forest ecosystem is retaining more than 8 billion tons of carbon. Human activities related to illegal gold mining, mercury pollution, deforestation, poaching have a huge and almost irreversible impact on ecosystems. Gold is found in rivers, from which it is extracted by scraping deposits from the riverbed. Thousands of kilometers of rivers have been destroyed this way. Turbidity and mercury content make life impossible, leading to the disappearance of flora and fauna. But gold is also found in the soil, and miners dig gaping holes in the tropical forest, sometimes in the heart of the Amazonian Park of the French Guiana. Unfortunately, to feed themselves in the middle of the forest, thousands of illegal miners are hunting animals, catching fish from the rivers. A wave of poaching is hitting hardly protected species, which are already threatened by the destruction of their habitat. To extract gold, illegal miners are using mercury. This substance, although extremely polluting and officially forbidden in French Guiana, is used massively for its attractive price. It takes 1.3 kilograms of mercury to extract 1 kilogram of gold. We see that informal gold production is estimated estimated at 10 tons per year. So we can say that over the past 40 years, hundreds of tons of mercury have been poured into the environment, specifically in the upper Moroni area. Scientists established that mercury released in the aquatic biotype is converted into methyl mercury, and this accumulates in all aquatic food chains. Thus, mercury poisons all ecosystems stored by plants, ingested by fish and other herbivorous animals, and is finally found in carnivorous organisms. So it's throughout the food chain. The situation has become dramatic. The rivers are empty. The Guiana and the Teco, indigenous peoples of Guyana, who live in the rivers, witness and have testified the disappearance of fish during the overfishing. Their way of life is disrupted. They can no longer cover their traditional food needs, as their meals are made of carnivorous fish on a daily basis. They are contaminated by high doses of mercury above the health standards for consumption. Thus, for the inhabitants, this methyl mercury ingested via the diet poses a real public health problem, particularly for pregnant women and young children, the population that is the most at risk. This is an image that can show you the path of mercury in this food chain. And this link there is between gold panning and the contamination and pollution of the ecosystem and human beings. This is a map created, produced by WWF. Thus, the impact of mercury on health are known and well documented thanks to studies conducted in Japan. Since 1950s, scientists have observed that Minamata disease, it's called after a city in Japan, it results in neurological, sensory, and motor symptoms. Ingested methyl mercury is neurotoxic and reprotoxic. Thus, it is harmful for reproduction. High levels of contamination can lead to disturbances in balance and walking, a reduction of hearing acuity, or a narrowing of the visual field. In young children, particularly sensitive, these lesions can be significant, with, among other things, delays in language development and behavioral disorders. For pregnant women, mercury can lead to damage to the brain and nervous system of the fetus. The first studies carried out in 1994 on the French Guiana population already revealed high contamination, up to 12 microgram per gram of hair on average in the Guyana population, the most affected one, for a health limit of 10 micrograms per gram of hair recommended by the World Health Organization. Furthermore, according to the report of neurodevelopmental investigations among methyl mercury exposed children in French Guiana, published in the review Environmental Research in May 2002, neurological and neuropsychological tests carried out in 1997 on the Amerindian population of Upper Moroni have showed that exposure levels of around 10 to 20 micrograms per gram of hair were moderate but objective signs of impaired neurological or neuropsychological development, and therefore impaired reasoning and biospatial organization capacities and motor skills. Even today, studies are carried out showing alarming results without any protective measures being taken by the public authorities. We are still far from knowing the extent of the damage caused by mercury pollution, as the studies, which are disseminated bit by bit, provide little data. But the people from the river have no choice but to turn away from their traditional food for fear of being contaminated, or to eat the fish they suspect will make them ill. at the population level, the only measures that are currently being taken are preventive actions to the river's inhabitants so that they can switch from their traditional diet, mainly composed by carnivorous fish, to a Western type of diet that is usually not adapted to their nutritional and cultural needs, which is also very expensive and difficult to access because of geographical distance from the cities. These cannot be bought in supermarkets or stores. The scourge of illegal gold panning is leading to an ecocide of French Amazonian aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem and an ethnocide of the peoples who depend on the river. Wayama, Teco, Bushinenges, and other communities are gradually being deprived of their deteriorating health and their disappearing way of life. Furthermore, illegal gold panning also causes security problems directly related to the increase in arms and drugs trafficking, prostitution, and delinquency, whether it involves rapes, looting in the fields, or even murder. Indigenous peoples are on the front line. On many occasions, heavily armed individuals have threatened the inhabitants on the very lands of their villages. This leads to frequent confrontation between Guyanese Amerindians and illegal foreign gold panners, and thus to the risk of conflict between communities. Since the 1980s, illegal gold panning has been spreading without the French state bringing any satisfactory solution to stop this plague. Around 500 French soldiers are deployed in French Guiana to fight against illegal gold mining, as well as more than 200 police officers. 11 patrols for all institutions combined are deployed each day. These figures may seem important, but French Guiana is a vast territory. Patrols are confronted to around 10,000 illegal miners called garimpeiros because of their origin, which most of the time is Brazilian, who are armed and fully equipped in an area bigger than Scotland, covered by a luxurious tropical vegetation. Despite the permanent deployment and new military operations since 2010 called Harpy, these are the operations, unfortunately, this has not stopped. Between 2011 and 2017, the number of illegal sites went up from 52 to 177 in the Guyana Amazonian Park, and only in 2018 the number decreased to 132 sites. Now, with the coronavirus situation, these figures are increasing. The gold panners attracted by the route of gold during the pandemic and economic crisis still have a strong pressure on the territory. Faced with this situation, organizations such as the Association of Victims of Moroni, represented by President Lina Oboya, gather inhabitants from the village of Wayana and Taluen in the upper Moroni area. The association has made possible the realization of mercury testing in 2019 while aiming at raising awareness of people about the risk induced by this contamination. The ONAG, a historic association for the defense of indigenous people's rights, has been reporting this situation for several years now, notably before the United Nations. The Maiouri Nature Guyane Association also acts to protect nature from underground exploitation, whether it be legal or illegal. These associations are guided in their efforts to protect the rights of the river and of indigenous people by Wild Legal Association, which gathered numerous jurists between 2019 and 2020 to conduct works to launch a civil and legal action and find new solution. In this case, the Prefecture of French Guiana and the French state should have been present today to represent the defense parties. Because of their inability to put a stop to this scandal, and the French institutions are indirectly responsible for the violation of the rights of nature and indigenous people in French Guiana. France has already been taken to court. In order to get their way in front of the French state, ONAG Association has already questioned the administrative jurisdiction of Guyane in 2013. Dismissed in 2015 for lack of interest and for not being able to participate in legal proceedings, associations referred to the Bordeaux Administrative Court of Appeal. The latter upheld the first instance judgment and dismissed once again the association without denying their argument nor their conclusions regarding the lack of action of the French state. After this new rejection, experts came to certify local consequences, and the National Consultative Mission of Human Rights, able to examine its own initiative cases regarding the violation of indigenous people rights in France, published a report. It recognizes the right of land and protection of ancestral lands. It also observes serious violation protection of environment regarding illegal gold panning in Guyana. Today, we reiterate these demands, putting France before its responsibilities, invoking a violation of rights of nature, of Amazonian ecosystems, of fauna and flora that's been destroyed as a result of failure of the French state, but also the violation of indigenous peoples' rights to life and to health, which are directly targeted by mercury pollution linked to illegal mining activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marine, for your presentation. I have a question, and it's when you talk about mercury that can lead to damage in the brain and the nervous system. These are systems that we humans share with vertebrates, everything from frogs to birds. I wonder, can you please mention anything about how mercury may affect other vertebrates than humans, please?
Thank you so much for your question. Well, there are very little studies that have come to us about the impact that mercury could have on other living beings. We know that plants store this mercury and transfer it to other living creatures such as fish by testing plants. This is impregnated of mercury in its tissues. So of course there's an impact on their physical integrity, but a very surprising example has to do with the contamination of Minamata. It is by this example that we've started working on mercury contamination in Japan. In Japan, in the 50s, scientists have observed the strange behavior of cats. They were being fed by fish caught in Minamata, and they showed a crisis behavior, and they were even suiciding. So they saw cats committing a suicide because of mercury poisoning. Their strange behavior was only linked to this contamination, linked to an industry that had poured mercury and contaminated waters. Thus, fish in this region of Minamata were contaminated. Today, we assume there's a link between this ingestion of the contaminated fish and the strange behavior of these cats that were linked to neurological, psychological damage that could have led to crisis and to some sort of a suicide by these cats. So, as if polluting ecosystems would not be enough, there's another form of impact on other ways of life in mammals and animals in general.
Thank you so much for this answer it's very interesting to know. I know that Valérie Cabanes have, so please, the floor is yours.
Merci Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca. We understood that we must go and look for those accountable in the state in their lack of action in this accompaniment for restoration and medical support. My question has to do rather with gold panners. I also try to understand where is the responsibility. In other words, in all the production chain, if mercury is forbidden by the Minamata Convention, and taking into account the figures that we've been provided, who is the accomplice of all this, and who do they resell this gold to? So how can we track those who are accountable, who are being divided by this gold that is being considered illegal? Of course, we must understand that mercury is extremely easy to transport in borders with Suriname. So there's huge amounts of mercury that go through borders and that is found in the territory, despite the fact that France is forbidden to use mercury on its territory. As a matter of fact, we only have to be in Upper Moroni to see these boats taking mercury directly to the gold panning site. And the porosity of this area, the borders are quite extensive, so it's very difficult to survey. That is why gold panners reach these clandestine sites very easily. Yes, but who is producing and selling mercury to the gold panners? It's actually produced in Suriname and it comes from China. So it reaches them directly through maritime transportation in the territory, and this is a resale. Mercury is being resold, and this is what we find throughout the South American continent. To respond to your second question, we know that for several years, and even from the origins of gold panning, we've always seen a sort of collaboration between gold panners, between legal gold miners and illegal gold miners. When gold panning started to develop in the Guianan territory, there were great industrial groups who had concessions, and we also saw the small concessions or gold panners that were looking for gold, these dreamers that were looking for El Dorado, that were, and thousands of them came to Guyana. From this time, put in it's a sort of collaboration. Of course, it's non-official between illegal gold miners and illegal gold miners, because in the territory, what happens is that based on legal concessions and in the surroundings, we do see illegal gold panners that take advantage of the knowledge of the sites. They know how to locate gold, and they take advantage of infrastructure, of highways, roads, and other equipments that have been installed by legal gold miners. And also what we've seen is that legal gold panners take advantage of the provisions of the legal gold miners, and they buy materials at very high prices, such as gasoline or other materials they need. So it's a give situation, a win-win situation, because legal gold miners also have access to gold at lower prices, because of course when we are working in clandestinity and illegally, there are no taxes to be paid, so it's easier to find this gold when we're not respecting environmental norms or rules. So there is a collusion between legal and illegal gold miners today. We also see a problem of follow-up of gold that is found, that is whitewashed from the legal circuit. In Guyana, normally this must be reported, this must be identified as produced in Guyana. Unfortunately, if it is rebought by non-official persons, then this whitewashed by a system, and then it's finally found on the gold market. When you buy your jewels, you might also be buying illegal gold that is coming from Guyana.
Thank you very much, Maureen Calment. I don't see any more questions for now. So then I want to thank you and call for the legal expert Alexis Tioka, who is the legal expert specialized in the rights of indigenous people. I wonder, Alexis Tioka, will you please describe how you are righteous to be speaking on behalf of the Moroni River in this case before presenting? Please, the floor is yours. The mic must be put on. Do you see the mute button, Alexis?
Voilà. Oui. Qu'est-ce que je dois dire là? Qu'est-ce qu'il faut? J'ai pas compris la question.
C'est à votre tour, Alexis.
Ouais, d'accord.
Merci.
Donc, je tiens à remercier tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing these very strong figures, and you're very impactful figures. We are fighting, we're staying strong for our life struggle. So, ladies and gentlemen, judges, in my capacity as a legal expert, I would like to demonstrate that France has been guilty of failure in the fight against illegal gold panning. In this inability to stop this phenomenon, indeed, as presented, illegal mining activities have extremely negative consequences on aquatic ecosystems. As a matter of fact, on illegal mining sites, we can often observe destruction or diversion of the riverbed and deforestation of the banks. To find gold, gold panners use high-pressure lances, scraping the earth, destroying the banks, and releasing muds into the watercourse. This results in high turbidity. In other words, water is extremely clouded, and as you can see in this picture, you can see water turbidity on the Moroni. This is a very recent photograph. In 2001, a study led by the Institute of Development Research showed ecosystems that are affected by gold panning activity Suspended matter levels rise up to 70 milligrams per liter. However, according to experts, a level of 50 milligrams per liter of suspended matter would be tolerable for river ecosystems. Above 20 milligrams per liter, the impact is real, especially as this level of concentration persists and is maintained within the ecosystem. Therefore, a level of 70 microgram per liter has the effect of permanently damaging the good health of these ecosystems, and the vital cycles of animals and plant species depend on the rivers concerned. These operations also result in the release of mercury naturally present in Guyanese soil, which is added to the mercury artificially emitted by gold panners. The potential pollutants of these extraction sites are the cause of considerable damage to nature. Main impacts are largely linked to the use of mercury. Numerous studies conducted by national institutions such as the Geological and Mining Research Bureau have been noting mercury contamination of freshwater, fish, and aquatic ecosystem in French Guiana for over 30 years. Without the state being able to respond. This could constitute violation of several rights provided in the Declaration of Mother Earth's rights. Their right to live and exist, their right to regeneration of their biocapacity, and to the continuity of their vital cycles and processes. The right to access water as a source of life and the right to full health. The right to be free of contamination, pollution, and toxic and radioactive waste. Their right to full and prompt reparation for violation and their rights recognized in this declaration resulting from human activities. And the aquatic ecosystem in Guyana and flora and fauna destroyed by the exploitation of rivers, banks, and contamination of mercury are victims of a violation enshrined in the Declaration of Mother Earth's right. On the other hand, the violation of the rights of nature also implies the violation of the rights of nature to a healthy environment. Victims are witness of this law, as well as the inhabitants of Upper Moroni. The indigenous peoples are dependent on natural resources and especially on fishing as the basis of their diet, being progressively deprived of food without culturally appropriate options to meet their nutritional needs. Any attack on these resources constitutes a violation of rights to food provided for in the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights adopted by the United Nations, to which France is part of. Furthermore, due to the consumption of fish at the end of the food chain, the level of methyl mercury detected in the people of Upper Moroni River is well above the standards prescribed by the World Health Organization and 4 times higher than in the coastal population. This is causing an increase in neurological situation, malformation, and violation to the right of health. As Madame Calmet has mentioned, gold mining activities and its consequences also lead to the loss of cultural landmarks, especially for local populations, who, due to its permanent feeling of insecurity, have left aside hunting and fishing activities, which are yet part of their traditional way of life. They can no longer find species to feed communities. Authorities do not advise pregnant women and children to be fed by these sources. Article 29 of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples that France has adhered to in 2007. It foresees in Article 29, Indigenous peoples have the right to the conservation and protection of the environment and the productive capacity of their lands or territories and resources. States shall establish and implement assistance programs for Indigenous peoples without discrimination. States shall take effective measures to ensure that no storage or disposal of hazardous materials shall take place in the lands or territory of Indigenous peoples without their free, prior, and informed consent. States shall also take effective measures to ensure that programs for monitoring, maintaining, and restoring of health of Indigenous peoples implemented the peoples affected by such materials and are duly implemented. The Indigenous peoples are victims who right to access the and to benefit from a healthy environment. This must be recognized by the Declaration of the United Nations of Indigenous People of 2007. I remind you, signed by France. So who is responsible? We only need to point gold panners that act with the hope of a better life. They're trying to survive as well. Consider that in this situation, the French state must respect ecosystems and the population that surround them. Its gold panners are responsible for the direct destruction of nature motivated by the price of gold in the market. The French state is accountable. The associations continue the struggle to fight gold mining to protect health and the security of the territory. Not been capable of containing this environmental and economic crisis. Knowing this contamination by mercury, they must pose a scientific analysis and the participation of organizations to recognize the area where waters are being contaminated. France is aware of the destruction of aquatic ecosystems and mercury contamination. They can put in place adequate actions to overcome this situation. However, attacks on nature continue to degrade. I remind you that as of January 1, 2006, mercury is forbidden in France. The French state must put in place effective measures taking into account the impact of legal gold panning on nature and the ecosystems of Moroni and its tributaries. France is thus responsible for the violation of the rights of nature in the Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth. In the same way, the French state must be held accountable by the inhabitants of Upper Moroni, particularly Guyana and Teco peoples, for the violation of their rights to access a healthy life. Regarding the measures that we recommend to ensure the recognition and the restoration of the ecosystem, we ask that the Moroni rivers and the tributaries are protected as subjects of rights, conservation, maintenance, and restoration. Must recognize the legal personality as foreseen in the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, right to life and continuity of life process without suffering any type of contamination. Governance of the Moroni River must be reviewed to integrate Amerindian peoples through an instance that can be created on the same model of Daro and Choco in Colombia. This instance must protect the interest of the river and guarantee the respect of rights. To restore the Moroni River and tributaries, we ask France to put in place a new model of governance with the responsibility of the state together with scientists and experts to fight against the gold panning that involves the indigenous peoples to the river. And also to remediate the current situation and then take all the measures to reestablish the commission, restoration, creation of council consult to protect. And this goes through the surveillance of the river and tributaries to make sure that the quality of water can be improved. It's important to work on all necessary measures to restore the aquatic ecosystems and preserve its good health. After all these violations of intrinsic rights, the state must also restore all damage to populations to guarantee the right to health caused by gold panning. The state must ensure a health follow-up regarding pregnant women. Mercury should not serve as 5 microgram per gram in hair. To protect indigenous peoples and from this contamination, respecting their traditions, we ask the jury to impose the state, put in place a conservation mechanism with scientists, doctors, and public to elaborate local solutions to preserve food sovereignty. In this social health and identity crisis, the state must maintain long-term all food security to have a new food sovereignty in the territory that respects traditions and culture. In the short term, the state cannot advise the population to change their diet. We need a substitution plan. The state needs to implement this urgently, a new diet to be preserved in the long term. This can be necessary, not possible that a person that does not have enough finance resources that is used to fish locally has to change their everyday diet. Given this crisis of Amerindian population and the consequences of gold panning, we ask for the reparation, and this implies the recognition as people, as indigenous people. In other words, the recognition of juridical status to allow preserving collective bio rights, ensuring the protection of fundamental rights, livelihoods, lands, territories, and natural resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis Teoka, for your legal expertise and your legal advices. I know that the judge has some questions for you, and I will ask also Cormac. The floor is yours to ask your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you both to Maureen Calme and Alexis Tioka. I found your presentations, your testimony very interesting and compelling. My question relates to the question of Indigenous sovereignty. I'm interested as to whether giving the Indigenous peoples in the area greater control or sovereignty over their lands would help improve the situation. Because I'm also aware of the fact that many of these people have guns, and if the chiefs or the traditional authorities are trying to stop them hunting or mining in the areas, and they have guns and the traditional authorities are not armed, it may also expose the traditional leadership and communities to more danger. So I'm interested to hear your views on whether the situation would be improved if greater responsibility, if greater power and authority was given to the Indigenous peoples over their lands, or whether it's better to focus on the responsibilities of the French state to keep these miners out, or perhaps it's both.
Alors,
Alexis, est-ce que tu as entendu la question en français?
non, j'ai pas entendu.
Je vais la répéter en français.
Alors, oui,
La question de Cormac, c'est est-ce que le fait de donner aux populations autochtones qui vivent dans la région un plus grand contrôle de leur territoire, c'est-à-dire un certain degré d'autogestion, améliorerait-il la situation ou vaut-il mieux se concentrer sur le devoir de l'État français de tenir à l'écart les mineurs illégaux?
Well, as of 3 months or 3 months ago, the leaders, the Guyana leaders, are organized. Yeah, there's a very young leader who has been elected recently, who has taken the leadership. So we have the role of the state on this issue, on this phenomenon, but we also have to look at the role of the population and the leaders in this regard. What is happening now is, well, right now there's an ongoing dialogue between the state and the traditional leaders, the traditional Guyana leaders, on this matter. The Guyana people have been asking that a negotiation process takes place. We've been asking for years, and little by little, the peoples and the leaders are achieving this. We simply needed action, form of action from the Guyana on the illegal gold panning sites, so that the French state could say, okay, we're going to dialogue. We'll listen to what you have to propose. So you see a little bit how complex this is, how this dialogue is difficult. To not date from now. We know many studies have been conducted, and we know the contamination of the Moroni River. And we've seen how they've come like warriors, and the Guyana people are warriors and remembering their traditions, and they go to the illegal sites. This is not our role to play. This is the role of the state. They have to protect the population and not endangering the population. And there is something very strong that has been done. Everyone has a role to play. The state has its role. The population of the upper Moroni, the Guyana people, through their traditional institutions and their leaders, their chiefs, they also have their role. They must contribute or propose solutions so we can eradicate this problem.
Thank you very much. I wonder if Lisa Mead have any questions for Alexis Tioka. If
Yes.
so,
I have a question.
thank you, Tom. Maybe after Lisa, you can ask your question.
Great, thank you. So Alexis, you and Marine Calme are focused mainly on mercury pollution, which is of course devastating in terms of the severity of its impacts. But I'm wondering whether there are any other major impacts of having 10,000 gold miners living and operating in the forests, either on the forests themselves, the rivers, or on the air. For example, I could imagine maybe plastic or other waste left behind by them, or fires that they start to cook food or whatever. That's my question. Thank you.
Oui. Marine.
Je peux vous la répéter, la question là. La question, c'est donc Alexis, vous et Marine Calme, vous êtes principalement focalisés sur la pollution au mercure, ce qui est bien sûr dévastateur par la gravité de ses impacts. Je me demande s'il y a d'autres impacts majeurs, que ce soit sur les forêts elles-mêmes, les rivières ou dans les airs, par exemple en raison du plastique et d'autres déchets laissés par les mineurs ou des incendies, par exemple pour cuire la nourriture.
Vous savez que lorsque un site...
You know that once an illegal site is installed, everything is contaminated. On one hand, we have gasoline and gas that is poured into water. Then we also have the problem of plastic. You know that the Moroni River has become a trash can because everything is being poured, all waste, gas, plastics, everything is thrown into the river. So it's a complete contamination of the Moroni River. Of course, mercury, gold panning, consequences, but mercury is not the only problem. There are other things. Really, the river has become a garbage dump. We see plastics hanging from tree branches. When we see water, when water comes up high, when the tide is high, plastics remain at 10 meters above the water level of the river on the branches. So contamination is permanent, it's ongoing through the pouring of gas, of different waste, human waste, and it's really terrible. It affects the river so much. It has become a garbage dump. And we see all waste, we see refrigerators floating on the water. It's awful. Everything is abandoned. Engines that are left behind. This is the landscape, and the river is dying little by little, and of course fish are also suffering the consequences.
Thank you for the answer, Alexis. I now give the floor to the judge, Tom Goldtooth, to ask your question. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I give thanks to the experts that presented their information, and specifically to Alex, I can't see the name there. But as has France ratified the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And if they have they adopted it, and are they implementing it with no qualification? I'm asking this question because there's a strong link here with the violation of the Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth applied here, and looking at the case on the rights of this river. the rights of its spirit, the rights of its voice, those rights, quote unquote, that we do recognize as Indigenous peoples, and the link to the rights of the Wayani people, the Amur Indian people, to practice their culture, to practice their rights. And there's a link between the river and a link to the people. So that's why I'm asking if France has recognized and ratified and implemented the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. If they have and they're allowing this to happen, then that adds to my observation that they are a perpetrator. They are an accomplice to a crime that is being perpetuated here. So if you can answer that question, thank you.
Alors, pour traduire, donc Tom dit qu'il y a un lien fort entre le Moroni et les peuples Guayana et Teco. Mais comme vous l'avez dit, la France a ratifié la Déclaration des droits des peuples autochtones, mais pour autant, vu tout ce que vous nous avez cité auparavant, il semblerait qu'elle ne soit pas appliquée, et donc l'État français serait complice de ce crime. Et donc, il voulait vous demander pourquoi est-ce que cette déclaration, dans les faits, n'est pas appliquée par l'État français, alors qu'il l'a ratifiée.
C'est Merci pour la question, parce que c'est vraiment une
Thank
question.
you for this question. It's a very pertinent question. France has adhered as of October 27 to the Declaration of the United Nations of Indigenous People. I was one of the negotiators in this process. And indeed, to this date, there is no implementation of the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous People in the national context. There are no measures in place. Even if indigenous organizations are demanding France applies these commitments, up to this date, nothing has been done regarding the Declaration of the United Nations on Indigenous People. Nothing has been done in this regard. As I speak, we're asking for juridical recognition as people. Although France has ratified this declaration, nothing has been done up to this date. No application whatsoever of this text. I'll provide a very specific example. The Convention of the Rights of Children, France has ratified this convention, but has put a very emphasis when we speak about indigenous children. So you can see how far France can go in international negotiations when they put parentheses parts they do not want to discuss due to national territories. So this is a very specific example. So the Declaration of the United Nations on Indigenous Peoples, maybe one day we will have an indigenous senator who will present a proposition for this to be applied, but that is something else. It's really important for indigenous people to participate in politics, to implement this agreement a little bit as it has already been done in Canada. In Canada, they have problems with the application of this norm as well, but at least there was a proposal in this area, so it's not bad.
Thank you very much for this answers. I now ask Valérie Cabanes if you have any last questions to Alexis Tioka. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Rebecca. Alors, c'est pas vraiment une question parce que Tom a posé la question.
I really don't have a question because Tom asked the question I was thinking of. It's actually a fake question. I'll explain myself. I've also followed the negotiations on the Declaration of Indigenous People Rights in 2017. What it's important to know, and I will ask Alex's opinion on this regard. What we need to understand, Tom, is that France has signed the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples, explaining that they did not have Indigenous peoples on their territory, living in their territory. So concretely, that they recognize the rights of Indigenous peoples in other countries, but the French Constitution indicates that we are a republic that is undividable, and that to ensure the equality of citizens, we cannot recognize any particularities. And it's under this statement that they're not respecting and that have not transcribed in their laws the rights of Indigenous people. So this, for us as judges, is difficult because they've ratified a declaration to which they consider they do not need to submit. They feel they do not need to submit. And I'd like to listen to the opinion, the comments of Alexis. I think we cannot say that France is violating its own law because they are not subject to the declaration as they are concerned. And the ILO Convention 1609, they consider that this convention, although it's signed and ratified, that does not apply to its own population because they do not have any Indigenous peoples on their territory. However, I think we should request, looking at what is happening in French Guiana, so that the Guyanese population and Indigenous peoples, and namely, highlight and speak about their rights. And I'll ask Alexis to clarify this. He has talked about the case of Choco in Colombia. Are you, Alexis, are you asking for a legal personality for the Moroni River and the recognition, the rights of nature, the right of governance of Indigenous peoples? And are you demanding or not the recognition of biocultural rights that effectively link in Choco between the rights of nature and the rights of Indigenous peoples? And excuse me for apologies for making this specification, but this is very particular and is happening in France, and it's posing a true problem.
Contraignants et pas contraignants pour les États. La France considère que la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones n'est pas un instrument juridique contraignant. Donc, s'il ne veut pas l'accepter et il ne veut pas l'adopter, il ne va pas l'adopter. Mais à travers son texte, la France est une et indivisible, elle se trompe quelque part. Nous, en tant que juristes, lorsqu'on étudie les textes au niveau national, beaucoup de codes reconnaissent l'existence sur le territoire français des peuples autochtones. Donc, en fin de compte, la France ne se met pas en adéquat avec ses propres lois, ses propres législations. Lorsque vous regardez le code des collectivités territoriales, le code des collectivités territoriales reconnaît l'existence sur le territoire national des peuples autochtones et reconnaît même l'autorité coutumière. Le code de l'environnement reconnaît l'existence des peuples autochtones, mais il n'appelle pas peuple autochtone. Ils disent communauté locale, communauté autochtone et locale. C'est comme ça qu'on l'appelle. Sinon,
Well, the Environmental Code has been modified in 2006 for the creation of this Amazonian park. So at some point on the territories, Indigenous people were living and for centuries. So we needed to change the Environmental Code to include the Wayana, the Teco, in the process. The Environmental Code recognizes it, and then there are many codes in France that exist that recognize this, that recognize the existence of Indigenous peoples on the national territory. A recent example, bilingualism is recognized because the general delegation of the French language recognizes Indigenous languages. So somehow France is contradicting itself. accepting the international convention that they're not applying, but they're somehow applying it as well. When we speak about particularities of their juridical system, and when we look at the French Constitution, we can already use these juridical particularity in some articles. And from there, it's the indigenous organization that must pressure the government, the state, so that these commitments are respected. Another example, the Convention of Biological Biodiversity signed by France, recognized by France, and talking about indigenous and local communities. So what is bothering them? It's the people's terminology that is bothering them. I've been working on this for 20 years in Geneva, and they've always called us indigenous communities, while this notion, this concept of people is not questioning the unity of the French people. Because indigenous people ask for self-determination, and we cannot, the state cannot close their eyes and ignore the situation, because it's enough to see a New Caledonia and how little by little in Guyana we speak about self-determination, we speak about full participation of indigenous people in decision making. In some months, the elections are upcoming, and there will be indigenous candidates. We must question unity of France. We're not questioning this unity. What we are questioning is the commitment, a deep commitment from France to assume their colonial past and their historical past. That's what we're asking for. The Universal Declaration of United Nations, we must recognize territories, and this is not being done. So we must know that 90% of territory belongs to France, to the state, and the 10 remaining percent collectivities are indigenous and community. Do you see how it works? The territory management is done by the state. Territory management is done by the state. Look at the damage on these gold mining sites. It's the responsibility of the state. If they cannot protect their territory against illegal gold panning, then they will not be able to protect the population either. It's simple as that. It's a reality.
Thank you so much, Alexis Dioke, and thank you, Judge, for all the questions. I now call for the third witness, who will be Maureen Cabanes, who will speak on behalf of Linnea Opoya, who is the president of the Association of Women Victims of Mercury, and also the injured party in this tribunal. Due to the bad internet connection, Linnea could not be present. So Maureen, please share with us the video and testimony.
En fait, comme je suis la présidente,
well, given that I am the president, I've been asking for samples. I requested to have the samples. And here we can see how mercury is found in hair.
mon fils,
So my son, well, given that my son does not like fish, he has two ppm. He does not like fish. However, the lady, you see, she has very high levels, higher than us. This is a local lady because I took samples from different households, and we see that the lady has 8 My aunt, she has 11, and the person, the man that was ill that left in the helicopter, he had 11, and the lady has 14. Well, it's because this lady, well, initially she had some headache, she fell. They'd already told us that we shouldn't eat fish, but she hasn't stopped. I guess this is the consequence. Well, we're used to eat fish, but given that they're contaminated, we can no longer eat fish. It's not forbidden, but we are advised to stop eating them. We've been told fish are contaminated. We've stopped a little bit. I do not eat too much fish, but I'm doing well. I've taken the test, and of course, I'm afraid. I don't want these levels to increase. Now I eat less. I eat less fish now. We would really appreciate help and support because this month, well, everybody is earning money, but it doesn't reach us. We have nothing. We have nothing. I see myself, I have nothing. I'm still waiting another week. If I earn some money, I'll be able to buy good fish, fish that is not contaminated. I will spend 150 euro. This is how I'm living, and I'm thinking and trying to find a way to find a solution to help people.
Thank you for sharing this video and testimony. Does the judge have any questions? There is a question from Facebook, and it's in France, so maybe somebody can translate it unless there is questions from the judge.
Si j'ai le droit, j'aimerais beaucoup pouvoir présenter Linia.
If you allow me, I would like to introduce Linia before we go on to the questions.
Please.
Merci.
Thank you. Linia Opoya, she lives in Dalouin. This is a small village in Upper Moroni. She is worried about gold panning, and she is the sister of traditional leader of her people, and she also is an artisan. She works in pottery. She is very involved in her community. She's a mother of 3. One of his children is going to school outside the village. It's important to know that in French Guiana, unfortunately, children are not scholarized close to their villages. They must go elsewhere, and they are separated from their parents. And I met her in 2017. At the time, she was already asking many questions and worried about the health of one of her children. So she undertook tests to know what were the level of contaminations. And I recall we were eating one day, we were at the table, and one of her children was refusing to eat fish because he was terrified about thinking that he could be poisoned by mercury, that he could even die or become severely ill, because for years they've been told that mercury is very bad for them. So Linia and other village inhabitants, they're told that they must not eat mercury and that they must avoid eating fish. And in spite of this, there is no aid, no support to escape from this situation. There are no alternatives. So this young boy is refusing to eat fish, but what can Linnea put on the table as a replacement? Because what they receive as a family allocations, they're not enough to buy food for a month. They have to go find food and in other areas and remote areas, and they will cost 10 times more than supermarkets here in Europe, because of course this food must be transported to the Amazon rainforest. So of course, Linnea, now she eats less. Her access to food is limited. She has no way to cover her basic needs, and she does not have enough to make her shopping in a supermarket. That's why she's so much involved in her community and worried about the situation. In 2018, we started having contact with a scientist that was working in Suriname, who had a machine to carry out tests on hair. These are the tests presented on the video, and these are tests that were carried out in 2019 thanks to the NGO that is working in the United States now. And Linnea has cut her hair, the hair of her children, of her neighbors, and has brought them to the United States to undertake the test and understand what were their levels of contamination. Thus, today, well, evidently, what is important to implement and what they wish is to have the necessary tools in Upper Moroni to undertake the test themselves, to be in the possibility and to be autonomous in the control of their own health. And this is, of course, important because unfortunately, we've seen in the past that physicians in Upper Moroni carried out the test but did not bring the test back to them or the results back to them. So they did not know their levels of contamination. So doctors and physicians were taking these results, they were putting them in their reports, but they were not informing the Moroni population. Thus, she has talked about many of similar cases, and she's keeping us updated when situation in Moroni are affected, and she is, of course, the person that is concerned about the situation of the river in her area, but of course in the whole region as well.
Thank you very much, Maureen Calmet, for presenting Linnea in her absence. I know that there is a question from Valérie Cabanes, so please go ahead and ask your question.
Merci en tout cas pour ces explications.
Thank you very much for these explanations on this. With precisely thinking, if we can no longer fish on the river and if we live and depend on the aid of the state, is this aid, the support enough to palliate this situation? You've answered my question, Maureen. What I'm trying to understand now, and I know that this is a problem in other areas in Guyana, if population, if inhabitants can replace the lack of protein that fish bring by hunting, or are they too close to Amazonian protected areas, given that their rights are not respected, they cannot access these hunting possibilities? Are they restricted by this as well? Yes, well, I will allow Alexis respond.
C'est une très bonne question.
That's an excellent question. Well, besides the presence of gold panners on old sites, you know that there's a whole area surrounding the site that are reserved. It was normally an area of game, bushmeat, and this was an area that belongs to an illegal gold panning site. And you know that they are very well organized. These poor people are working 24/7. There is a team of hunters, of fishermen. They're very well organized. So the fear that Guyana people have to go hunting and to find themselves next to a gold panner in their hunting territory, they are restricted and refrained from doing it. They stay in their area, and same thing happens with fishing and hunting. If you find something or you capture something interesting from you have the Amazon rainforest park, you know that this for Guyana and for the indigenous peoples of the site, this is forbidden. This cannot be done in the national park. Not hunting, not fishing, or planting, or collecting grains or fruit. For them, the Amazon park is forbidden. So again, as you mentioned, this is a restriction. While we're talking about the heart of the Amazon forest, and this is where this illegal activity is expanding. Only last week, the police and we found these illegal activities in the heart of the rainforest, these activities that are supposed to be forbidden. So there's a police to restrict these activities to bring food on the table. Well, and all game hunting is prohibited. So there are so many restrictions, so many small barriers surrounding these people that finally the only thing they can do, like Maureen mentioned, they can only traveling in the river, reaching a supermarket to be able to buy some supplies with the help of the state that reaches the community. And even the aid that the state provides is not enough today to feed a family. So we see restrictions coming closer to the Guyana people, forcing them, even from the people of the Amazon park, they're forcing them to have chicken in their areas for food. And this is not traditional. This is not part of traditional diet. It's normally a pet for the children. Pigs are pets for children. So look at how we've restrained the livelihoods of these populations. The creation of the park in 2006 has only brought problems, restrictions, trouble, and no solutions for the concerned population. Thank you. I know that Eric has been working on this matter for a long time.
So thank you for the questions and thank you for all the answers. I will now go on to the summary of today's session and give the concluding remarks on the prosecution. Today, we have heard about the words from case presenter, legal experts, and injured party witness, explaining how the past and present illegal gold mining in French Guiana is violating the rights of nature, the rights of Moroni River, and the rights of its defenders. Different legal frameworks have been referred to for violations, among them the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, a form of jurisprudence this tribunal relies upon. This case is a tragic example how illegal treasure hunt for gold is destroying the vital component of life itself, our true invaluable treasures. We have learned that the exceptional biodiversity to the tropic rainforest in French Guiana consists of are amongst the richest in the world. Across the country, the Moroni River flows, an aquatic ecosystem with intrinsic value and fundamental importance to the existence of many beings. This includes people as the Vaiana and Teque Mary Indian peoples who have established upstream the river in territory by the name of Moroni. In this area, we also find numerous of species of amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and more than 200 species of water fishes. We are present here today in this tribunal because of the Guyanese Amazonian terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem in particular are in grave danger. For over 40 years, this ecosystem has been polluted with hundreds of tons of mercury, a chemical substance widely used in the process of illegal gold mining. This is largely due to an attractive price, which keeps the substance desired even though being declared illegal in the country. The immense use has resulted in contamination with severe impacts on this ecosystem and the indigenous and local communities that depends on them. Other human activities related to illegal gold mining, such as deforestation and poaching, are also contributing to the destruction, posing multiple threats for an already endangered species. Contamination by mercury pollution and destroyed by exploiting the riverbeds and streams, the Guyanese aquatic systems, as well as its flora and fauna and other species, are victims for the violation of several rights provided by the Universal Declaration of the Mother Earth, such as the right to life and existence, the right to regeneration of the biocapacity and the continually of the vital cycles and processes without disturbance of human origin, the right to water as a source of life, and the right to full health, the right to be free from contamination, pollution, and toxic or radioactive waste, the right to full and prompt reparation for violations of the rights recognized in the Declaration resulting from human activities. We have also heard the witness inured party, Linnea Hoya, representing the voice of indigenous people in French Guiana, as she herself is a resident of the Vaiana Mary Indian village of Taolin in the Moroni region. They are defenders on the front line who live in communion with the rivers. Her testimony states that their way of life is disrupted. No longer can they safely rely on the same source of food as previous generation, since meals traditionally have been consisting of carnivorous fish. Today the fish are contaminated by high doses of mercury above the health standard for consumption. The people living by and of the river have no choice but to turn away from their traditional food for fear of being contaminated or to eat a fish that will likely make them sick. Methyl mercury ingested via the diet poses a real public health problem, particularly for pregnant women and young children, the most at risk. Hence, the founding of the Association of Women Victims of Mercury, that Linnea Opoya is the president of. Ingested methyl mercury is neurotoxic and reprotoxic. Linnea Opoya herself has high levels of methyl mercury in her body, as does her other relatives. The illegal gold mining also causes the security problem directly related in the increase of weapons and drug traffic, as well as prostitutions. Threats, rapes, and murders of indigenous people who are in the front line is a reality due to the frequent confrontations between Guyanese Amerindians and illegal foreign gold miners. This devastating situation for both ecosystems and people, which the illegal gold mining has caused, is ultimately leading to an ecocide of the French Amazonian aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem, and an ethnocide of the people who depend on the river. The ultimate responsibility rests on the shoulders of the French state, who is also the party of defense in this tribunal. The French state has, although being fully aware of this issue since the beginning of 1980s, still not been able to implement a satisfactory solution. As we could hear from the legal expert today, between 2011 and 2017, the number of illegal sites has went up from 52 to 177 in the Guyana Amazonian Park. During the corona pandemic, the situation has worsened. The French state needs to be held accountable for this failure. I thereby ask the tribunal to recognize the responsibility of the French state responsible for serious violation of the fundamental rights to life, health, access to water, food, security, a healthy environment, and for violation against the preservation of the territory of the ethnic communities that populates the Guyana rivers and its tributaries. These violations are constituted by not providing an adequate, articulated, coordinated, and effective institutional response to deal with the environmental and humanitarian issues which affect the regions and have worsened in recent years due to the conduct of intensive illegal mining activities. I ask to recognize the Amazonian aquatic ecosystem, rivers, watercourses, stream beds, and underground water, in particular the Moroni River and its tributaries, as subjects of rights, holders of the rights to protection, conservation, maintenance, and restoration by the state and the ethnic communities concerned. To recognize the right to water as a source of life and the right to full health, free from contamination, pollution, toxic or radioactive waste. And to recognize the right and full prompt reparation for violations of the rights recognized in the declaration resulting from human activities. If we recognize the responsibility, the rights of nature with its need for restoration, we also need implementation. This must be done with involvement from the local people, the defenders of the Moroni, and therefore I also ask the judge to order with the aim of ensuring adequate protection, recovery, and conservation for the Moroni River, the creation of a council composed by appointed members of the communities who will become the guardians of the rights of the river with the support of independent advisory team of scientists. And to order an implementation of an action plan aimed at definitely eliminating illegal mining activities in cooperation with the inhabitants of the Moroni region. And to order the immediate design and implementation of a plan to decontaminate the Moroni River and its tributaries to restore its ecosystems. To order the design and implementation of an action plan recover traditional forms of day substance ensuring food security in the region. And to order the implementation of local economic alternative projects in order to guarantee food security for these people. Thank you, Honorable Judge. I hereby give the word to the President, Cormac Cullinan.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Prosecutor, for your powerful summary of the case, which you have very competently presented to the panel of judges here today. I now call on my brother Judge Tom Goldtooth to make some observations on what we've heard.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, as the lead judge in this tribunal, I find this case a violation on the rights of the Moroni River, perpetuating serious and systemic violations of the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. Also, this accompanies human rights violations, and in several cases, the harm was so severe as to constitute ecocide, terroricide, and conditions of genocide of the Wayani and Teco indigenous peoples, the Mara Indians there. It is clear that France has failed to protect the river and failed in the recognition of the inherent rights of the Wayani and the Teco Amerindian indigenous peoples and other indigenous peoples as well. France is a perpetrator of a crime against the river. There are many accomplices as well. In this case, the legal system in France did not provide adequate remedies to prevent ongoing harm. The presenters, I really thank the presenters who made it clear that the consequences of France allowing the illegal gold mining and trafficking that causes this mercury contamination are leading to, I hate to say, irreversible and fatal changes to that web of life there. And it's a grave violation of Mother Earth's rights and the rights of her waterways, the Moroni River, the impacts to the water of life, and the link to the need for protection of the sacredness of the creative female principles of Mother Earth requires action. This is linked to the mercury effects to the woman and the children, and issues of France's governance system that's based upon domination, patriarchy, and colonialism. France is engaged in suppressing the rights of indigenous peoples. It was interesting to hear that France has implemented and ratified the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but is failing to carry out that position in their Pacific colonies. I was doing some research on the Pacific colonies that there they are also suppressing the rights of indigenous peoples in those colonies, as well as what we are witnessing here in this testimony in French Guiana. So this is very, indeed, very important. My final comments is that the issues faced in French Guiana are not happening in isolation. The mercury is coming from elsewhere. The illegal miners are coming from elsewhere. Gold is being sold elsewhere. And the aquatic ecosystem does not exist solely in French Guiana. There are many accomplices in this crime being perpetuated. The indigenous peoples are being poisoned through these global actions and regional actions there in Brazil, in South America, and are left with little recourse to protect their waters and their food sovereignty. Any legal mechanisms available need to be used to reverse this, recognizing the rights of the aquatic waterways, the Moroni River, and seeking international attention on this will help. It must be remembered, however, that indigenous peoples are not incidental to all of this, but rather front and center. We need to hold France accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Goldtooth, for that powerful summary of the implications of what we've heard. And I certainly think that all of us have been extremely disturbed by the evidence before us. And I just, before I close, just want to draw on one particular aspect. As Tom has pointed out, these events are not isolated, they are linked. And here we are, a European tribunal listening to a case concerning a river which borders, is the border between two countries in South America. And of course, so many courts and tribunals around the world are limited in their jurisdiction. They only have jurisdiction within the territories of a particular country or a particular area. And this creates difficulties because, of course, we are talking about one Earth where everything is interlinked. And this is one of the reasons why a tribunal like this is particularly important, because our jurisdiction is Earth. It is not limited to a particular country. And so we are able to address these issues in a holistic way and look at all the factors that are relevant, as Tom Goldtooth has alluded to. And this is obviously, so our jurisdiction is based on the reality of the interconnectedness of all of this community of life, and not on artificial political boundaries. And this will, of course, be reflected in the judgment that we will prepare on this case, the written judgment that we will prepare on this case in due course. So in closing, I'd like to thank everybody for the time and effort that they have put into making this tribunal happen, and to allowing the voices of the Moroni, the river, of the peoples, and of all the creatures who live there, to be heard in some small way in an international forum like this. Thank you all. I declare this tribunal closed.
Merci Cormac. Merci à tous et tous d'avoir
Thank
participé. Je
you,
vous
Carmen.
remercie
Thank you
cette
so much
audience
for all
qui
of
était
you for
vraiment très
participating.
enrichissante.
Thank you
Sachez
for
que
our
le
audience,
Co-Secretariat
and I'd
reste
just
ouvert.
like
Les
you
présentateurs
to
et
know that the
présentatrices peuvent continuer de nous
Co-Secretariat
envoyer
remains
par email
open.
des informations et des
Presenters
documents que nous
can
transmettrons
continue
par la
to
suite au
send
juge
us all
pour qu'ils soient
information
pris en
by
considération
email
dans le
or
verdict
documents
final.
that we will
Par
pass
ailleurs, si la
on to the
situation
judges
sanitaire le
so
permet,
that
le
they
verdict
take this
sera
into
rendu en personne à Marseille
consideration for the
lors du
final
congrès de
verdict.
l'IUCN
If
en septembre
the
prochain.
health situation
Je
allows
vous
it,
remercie
the
encore une
verdict
fois et je
will
vous souhaite une très
be
belle soirée à tous et à
held
toutes.
live in Marseille in presence. So I'd like to once again thank you all for participating.